Hello, everyone. Welcome to Connecting with the Stars. I'm Mary Edwards. I'm here with Dave Barnett, aka Dave the Mystic, you'll hear about for obvious reasons in a minute. It's wonderful to have you here again, Dave, for the second time.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Oh, good. Well, I'm going to let you tell them a bit about your background. You're amazing. Dave lives in Littleton, Colorado, and has lots of gifts, so I'm going to let him explain it. And after a bio and some introduction here, we'll dive into he's to my 128 hybrid children that I have living on and off planet, and the 125 trips I've been going off planet to do some interior work, just to give you a little mishmash of what Dave's been helping me with and guiding me through these last many months to investigate more about our out of this world lives that we live here. So Dave, take it away. I'd like to just explain a little bit about you and how you got there and what your special gifts are.
Absolutely. Well, I always tell people if I'd seen where I was going to be here at this point in time, if it had been shown to me back in the early 1980s, I probably would have run from the room screaming. Um, I never expected to have one foot in each of two worlds, one foot in the world of our reality as we see it, and one foot in the world of the spiritual plane, where I do a lot of work. But I'll go back and explain it to you. I've been in aerospace for most of my career, for 40 plus years, and with electrical engineering degrees. In fifth grade, I discovered electronic parts, and that's about back to 1965. And I became fascinated with how circuits worked, and I just had to know. And I started taking apart TVs. I started working towards getting my ham radio license and building ham radios, all this type of thing. So I was very fascinated with that. Well, my dad was an engineer, and then he became an Episcopal priest. He was ordained when I was about 4 years old. Sad to say, my parents divorced when I was around 11, and he left. And we stayed in touch and had as good a relationship as you can expect with an absentee father. Um, but my mom got interested in astrology, and she had a reading that she thought would just be fun, where it'd be you're going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger, sort of like you see in the newspaper. And it was a very evidential astrology reading. Things like, well, I see you broke your left arm when you were 5 years old. Well, yes, she did. Oh, you have a mole on your upper right thigh. Well, yes, she did. So she's a very inquisitive woman and curious, and so she had to learn how this worked. So she and her neighbor friend who went with her started taking the classes and studying it very intently, and also got into the network of an astrology organization that had a branch in Wichita, where I grew up. And so time went on, but when I was in junior high and high school, my mom would use me as sort of the test subject to try these different things. I had three older brothers, and none of them would have anything to do with it. They joked about my mom being Madame Zelda, and they needed to get her a turban with a big jewel on the front, so people would know. And they even joked about putting a sign in the front yard with one of those great big palms, like a palm reader. And so she had a good sense of humor. She went along with it, but so I tried things with her. So I was open to metaphysics. I didn't pursue it actively after I moved out and went to college, but I was aware of it. I went to Kansas State, got my bachelor's degree in Michigan. I got my master's in electrical engineering. I worked at General Motors for a couple years, decided I didn't like Michigan or General Motors, and moved back to Wichita. And I worked for Boeing for a couple years, background family. And then Boeing started making a lot of noise about moving us all down to Huntsville, Alabama, and that just wasn't going to happen for me. And I started looking around again, and Martin Marietta came through Wichita in 1981, hiring for Denver. And I took a plant visit and got an offer, and we packed up and moved out to Denver, where my wife and I and our family have lived ever since. In 1983, I went back to my 10th high school reunion and ran into the usual mix of people. And I ran into an old friend. His name is Barry. Sadly, he passed several years ago. But Barry talked to me and he said, Dave, did you become an electrical engineer like you expected? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you think it's possible to change things at a distance? And he wouldn't explain it. He kept just talking around the issue. And I said, come on out with it. What's going on? And he said, well, I'd rather show you. Let's go to my house after the picnic. So I caught a ride with him over to his house. And the first thing we did when we got out of the car, he walked me over to the electric meter on the side of his house. And he was up there and he said, do you see how fast the wheel is spinning? And the wheel in a traditional electric meter spins in proportion to how much power you're using at that moment. And I said, sure, I can see that. He points to the meter and he says, now, and the wheel slowed by about a third. And then he pipes up and says, I did that to my mother's house several months ago, and her bills are still lower. Wow, okay, that's pretty cool. Again, keep in mind I'm an electrical engineer. I could easily detect if there was somehow faking this, and clearly it wasn't. We went inside, and he had a little black and white TV on rabbit ears. Wichita at that time only had 4 broadcast channels, and he set the station to a non-station, so it's just snow, just static on the screen. And he points to the TV and he says, "Now," and the TV tunes in a channel, and there's a station just there. And I was like, "Wow, this is pretty impressive." Um, I know electronic circuits, I know radio circuits and TV circuits, and that is not trivial to change the tuning like that, um, even with mechanical parts or electronic parts. And to do it with just the power of your mind was quite impressive. The next thing he did was he walked me over to where he has this big fancy stereo. His job at the time was, and for a long time, was as an FM disc jockey. And he worked at one of the Wichita stations. So he had a very nice radio and stereo, and it had the standard needles on it for the volume on the left and right, what they call the VU when they're labeled for volume unit or something silly. And he said, do you see how the needles are moving with the music? And it's obvious. The right speaker got louder, then the needle went up. Right speaker got quieter, came down. He points at the stereo and he goes, now, and the needles go out of phase with the music. So when the music gets louder, the needle goes down, and when it gets softer, the needle goes up. It's like, well, this is very fascinating. He said, well, I want to show you another one. We go back out to his car, and we climb in the car, and he starts it and has it just idling with his hands and feet off the controls. And he kind of points towards the engine and says, now. And the idle starts dropping off and drops to the point where the car is stalling. And then he announces to me, he says, yeah, I can stall other cars in traffic. And, I'm sitting there, wow, this is pretty fantastic. And this is the point when I talk to audiences about this, they all start laughing because we'd all love to have the capability to stall other cars in traffic, um, especially on some of the freeways here in Denver. And I'm sure out there in your area of the country, that'd be a handy tool too. Um, so he said, one more thing, let me show you something else. And so he drove downtown Wichita to the radio station, and we went in the back door and went to the room where they have all the meters that gauge the performance of the transmitter. Now, this was a 50,000 watt FM station, and he pointed out there was a digital panel meter, and it was reading 99.6. And he said, that is the percentage of the 50,000 watts that's going out the antenna right now. Now, as an electrical engineer, knowing the technology at that time, I can tell you there might have been, to get 50,000 watts out that antenna, there may have been 90,000 watts of power consumed off the grid to make that transmitter work. But he said, do you see how it's stable? I said, yeah, 99.6 rock solid. He said, I can lower the output power on the station. I have to be careful not to lower it very much because I have lowered it too much in the past and I've tripped the station off the air. It thought there was a fault. I said, well, okay. And he said, do you see how it's stable? I said, yeah, absolutely stable. And he points at it and he goes, now, and it drops to 99.2. So that's 0.4% of 50,000 watts plus the overhead power that he just controlled with his mind. And I have to tell you, over the years that we tried different experiments, every time he tried an experiment that we could come up with, he always got an effect. Um, I found very, very few people in the literature who can manipulate electronics on a big scale. It always goes the way they want it, and it's always an effect when they ask for it. Those types of things, just so rare. I can't recall reading about other people who could do stuff like this. Very fantastic. The equivalent of people who do some type of hands-on healing, and they're so gifted that they touch somebody, and sure enough, they're suddenly cured, and they lose the attributes of whatever chronic wasting disease or whatever they have, and they recover. It's that type of gift that he had. Well, I came back to Denver and I went back to my work, and it really put me in a position where I said, okay, I felt like the two big hands of God had come down around me and said, I'm going to give you a demonstration that you can't ignore because it's in your area of specialty. I was an electrical engineer. Barry could do electronic phenomena. So I came back and I said, I have to figure out what's going on here. I have to know. And being the type of person, I'm always gung ho. I jump into a lot of things. I get involved with therapeutic touch healing system and start taking all their classes that I can get. It's a form of hands-on energy healing. I got very involved with a group called the Tibetan Foundation. They did channeling of ascended masters, and I attended one of their weekend seminars on channeling. And I'm moderately okay as a channel, but information does come through me spiritually. I also got very involved with some psychic development courses at the local bookstores, and I was very blessed. Nothing's a coincidence, as I know now. I met three women there, and we got on famously, all four of us in the class. And we decided that after the class was over, we would meet every 2 weeks during an evening, alternating at houses, and try different things. It's always nice to do these things with people who are open to it, not people who are saying, "Oh, that's crazy. I'm skeptical. Oh, that can't work. Now prove it to me." No, these are people open to it. What can happen here? And we did all kinds of tests and experiments and tried what if questions. It was a great experience. And we did that for a couple of years. So I move on and I continue to start developing a practice on the side. I was very careful that people at Lockheed knew me just as Dave the engineer, nothing else. And because in the 80s, they just wouldn't have been open to that. And even when we got to having the internet, you keep in mind this was before the internet was there. After we got the internet and I started having websites, I was very careful on my websites that I would put my information in a graphic so that these web crawlers couldn't find my cell phone number or anything else about me or my name, so people couldn't search me, and who knew me as an engineer to find this, and that
Here
worked
you are
pretty
today,
well.
right? And here you are today. No,
Yeah, and so I just kept doing that. So the late '90s in spiritual readings, I started getting a lot of pressure from spiritual beings who said, you got to ramp it up, you got to step it up. And then in 2002, the message got even stronger, and I started seriously meditating to see what messages would come through, how I could grow my spirituality. In 2003, I won some contracts with a small independent company for Air Force research work. And I left my engineering job at that time. And I heard a voice in my head, just like we're talking, that said, now you have all the money that you need, go out and learn everything you can about healing. And so I spent the next 4 years, 2003 to 2007, taking all the classes I could in different healing modalities. I took 2 years of psychic development classes with the Denver medium, and a lot of gifts started coming through. Gifts such as retrieving souls from their personal hells, which was a fascinating thing. I was led by spiritual beings to develop a protocol for getting people out of their self-created hells, which, from my viewpoint and their viewpoint, is the only kind of hell there is. There is not an objective hell. It's if you die believing in hell and you believe you belong there and you have an image of what it should look like, the universe says yes, and it will create that hell for you. And you'll be there until you finally get bored and you say, is this all there is? And an angel may step in and say, you could have gone to the spiritual plane anytime you wanted. Well, they wanted me to develop a protocol for getting these people out of these self-created hells and get them back to a spiritual plane. So I did that. and also worked with people in limbo and people in purgatory and other areas where they have some type of training that has led them to a place that takes them away from the spiritual plane. I also started having lots of downloads on how to do past lives and read the Akashic records. That came through for me. In 2008, I started doing energy and entity clearings. That was just a chance event where, again, no coincidences. A woman called me and said she was a friend of my daughter's, and she had phenomena in her house. And could I do something about it? And I was in Las Vegas on vacation. I said, well, I'll take a stab at it. And I did a first pass on it. The house had had a previous owner who had hanged himself in the basement. They weren't told that when they bought the house. They found out about it later, and obviously he was walking around the house bothering them. And I had to do 2 passes, and I developed some more sophistication on the clearing, and then all her effects went away, and that kicked me off on doing clearings, and I've just expanded that practice now for the last 14 years, and I've probably done over 3,000 clearings now. I do them all remotely. Um, I do a lot of work with subconscious core beliefs. I really truly find that people have core beliefs in their subconscious. You could also see them as being embedded in their energy fields in different layers of the aura. Uh, Barbara Brennan talks about that in Hands of Light. And I work with modifying those core beliefs to change trends or controlling factors in people's lives where they want to update their lifetime and move better. And then along the way, I started interacting with ETs, and um, I started seeing a lot of phenomena. They started showing me things. I've always been grateful to the universe for giving me lots of demos. I'm an engineer. I'm a little bit of a show me person, and I get those. And I've probably seen a half a dozen times now what to the average person, if they just glance, they say, "Oh, that's an airliner up there." And it's like, well, if you look closer, it doesn't have wings. It's not making any noise. It's hovering or flying very slow. But the average person just glances at it and says, oh, just a quick snapshot. Oh, there's a plane up there. And I've seen hybrid people, partial ET, partial human. They have slightly different appearance. I've seen them in meetings, and sometimes if they notice me noticing them, then they get up and leave and disappear. So I can't find an excuse to go over and talk to them. Um,
So lots of
I
incredible gifts you have, and that's why we're here
yeah.
talking about it today, because you actually helped me for several years on and off when a friend of mine's son passed, and I wanted to help the mother, and I wanted to find a rocket scientist that had a mystical part to them, like my father did. And my dad was also an electrical engineer and a rocket scientist, as was his father and his brothers. He was the youngest of three boys. You were the youngest of four. And he went to Northwestern and had a rocket science company forever. And you've been helping me unpack my past lives, my 94 generations of space.
Hmm.
And it was not an easy find to find a Dave the Mystic who was also a rocket scientist. I was very specific that I wanted somebody like my father's brain that would really be able to track information and give me more information about myself. And just briefly, too, before we dive into some of the hybrid children in my 94 generations of space and some of the off planet work I've done, my father, like you, had all those gifts. And I didn't know about, I knew he was a rocket scientist with a big aeronautical aerospace company for my whole lifetime, all these 70 years that I've been alive. But he never spoke to me about it because he wasn't able to, because of his work with NASA and the US government and the military from World War II till when they sold the company in the 1990s. But during that time, Werner von Braun worked with him, as maybe a couple of you listening have heard me talk about a little bit. And then I meet Dave to really help dig through some of why, I was on a craft at age 5 with my father. Why was he there? Why wouldn't he talk to me my whole life? So anyway, and I've been off planet a couple hundred times. I have a bunch of hybrid children. I knew I was pregnant through my college and early years before I had my own children in the late 30s. So I had lots of questions that I had put aside after doing my career of interior design and architecture and development stuff at firms worked at NASA for several years, worked globally and locally. Space lifting spaces. I have and one of my special gifts is being able to read spaces, interior spaces. My dad was the rocket scientist. My mother's father was an architect, so I grew up with Earth and outer space. But anyway, I've been wondering. I'd done past life work for on and off since I was 18. When I moved to Boulder, Colorado, went to CU. We have that in common too. I lived there for about 10 years and worked at a firm that designed the Star Trek logo and did work globally. But I kept having these dreams other than my going on a craft at age 5 and age 6 and age 10, which I'm just starting to unpack really and waking up now to all of these experiences over the last couple of years. So Dave has helped me look back at the weaving of the thread of design and healing that I've had in my family that go all the way back. And maybe you could just speak to that a little bit, because you could probably relate it more than I, why they picked me, why I was there, and then we can go into the hybridization, my kids, that goes back from my father to my grandfather and down to my kids. So love you to hear.
Sure,
You've been
sure.
so helpful with it.
Well, it's been a fascinating journey working with you, and for the listeners out there, they are careful in the spiritual plane on what they reveal and the pace at which they reveal it. Um, what are the reactions if you were told that you're half ET and you had no preparation for that? Many people would either be in shock or they would discount it. You see the same thing when you talk about past lives and you say, oh, if you spring it on somebody too quick and you say you've had a past life where you were a murderous thug in a jail and you're a very bad guy, and they'd say, oh, and they're in shock. And so you have to prepare people for this. And I think when this information comes through, such as all the information from Mary, it's come through in a slow stream. If Mary had heard all this stuff that we've discovered right at the very first part, she might just close the book and said, "No, I'm not ready for this," and walked away. But we've spent a year or two gradually enhancing this experience. And so when you look at the big story, it goes back way back to somewhere around 0 AD, the beginning of our current numbering system for time after the BCs were over. And uh, there's a lineage that was started or discovered that had some DNA threads that were to be nurtured, to be enhanced over time, to be sorted. Occasionally, some branches might be sort of pruned off of this path coming forward in time, and over 2,000 years, which if you just talk on average, a generation is 20 years for when you start having kids, then we're talking 40 to 50 generations. And this particular lineage that has come down to Mary has just kind of carried on. You might have heard that some people talk about, Jesus had children, and there's a lineage out of that. We also talk about royalty in Europe, where you really can't be the King of England or the Queen of England unless you have that royal blood and you have that path. And it doesn't matter who you've married. Uh, you have to be genetically tied to those roots. And so genealogy is a big thing there. Genealogy was a big thing in the Old Testament. If you look at Kings and Chronicles, is who begat who begat who begat who? What is that thread that comes through? And so Mary's family lineage has this very long thread, and certainly, things change over time, and people fall off of the family tree. Sort of like we talk about, well, the nuts fall off the family tree, but Mary has this, wonderfully long path, and when you start getting into the history that she's been able to access through looking at her family lineage, you go back to the 1700s, you start seeing famous people, you start seeing royalty, and then you come into this lifetime, and Mary's parents and grandparents, great grandparents, all led very fascinating, very actualized lives. They weren't shrinking violets. They didn't settle for being the streetcar porter. You know, it just wasn't in the cards for them. Opportunities were there, and so um, Mary's had a very fascinating life, and it looks very much like there's an encouragement out of a number of groups of ETs, but especially the Pleiadians, to encourage this, so that we end up with who Mary is today. And Mary has some interesting genetics and things that you might say to the average person, this would be a challenge. This would be hard to overcome in this lifetime. These are problems growing up. These are problems interacting with people. These are problems going through school. Um, the flip side, Mary may be wired in such a way that um, she is a good receptive vessel or a vehicle for different pieces of information that are coming through that need to come through, and also gifts and skills she has, to the point that as we worked with this, we found that um, Mary and her expertise do get borrowed periodically at night to go to other planets, other places, to do work using her gifts that she's developed here in a lifetime of all the design and architecture and art and working with color. Um, it really brings to mind the idea that in a lot of cases, if you watch sci-fi movies, they still do this where I don't care whether it's Alien or Star Trek or whatever, plain walls, gray walls, metallic surfaces, metallic decks. Um, the only color in the place are some indicator lights on a control panel, and other than that, uh, total boredom. Now, if you or I were going to live in an environment like that for decades, we sure would be looking for something better than that. We'd be looking for color. We'd be looking for music and sound. We'd be looking for comfy furniture. We'd be looking for intriguing art and decor on the walls that would engage us. We wouldn't just put up with, okay, here's another corridor with gray walls. Here's another corridor with gray walls. Um, it just won't work like that. You even see it in Star Wars, and it's hard to believe that any future race like that, uh, just on morale purposes alone for soldiers, would put them in a place where, okay, just another set of white corridors. You know, it just it doesn't work very well. And the other thing that Mary brings to it with these ETs is a lot of the ETs, they appreciate the fact that they don't think and operate like us. And if they're going to bring groups of humans out to these other sites to live, to work, to maybe expand the population and resettle, um, they have to work with the aesthetics. They can't ignore that. Otherwise, they'll have people committing suicide out of boredom and depression. It would just happen. And Mary's worked in different environments for schools and other places, worked with special needs people, all these types of things. So she has a high sensitivity and an acute sense of how these people tick, how they think, what they appreciate, and that's given her a lot of insights that it really seems like these ETs are using her gifts to get there. So she has a very interesting set of gifts and skills.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, yeah, 40 years in interior design. I got a BFA, then an interior design degree, then I went to architecture school. I'm working at NASA, and they've told me that, as you know, that they've been watching since I worked on the first International Space Station, which was all about isolation and confinement. And we all experienced one little mini ounce of that during COVID. But and then they've watched my family forever. My dad being such an open person, having psychic gifts, and I've been talking to Dad with Dave um, over the last several months, who passed about 10 years ago, and I'm finally now finding out why he couldn't talk to me all those years while he was alive, because of his involvement and his honor and his duty to keep his honor code to not talk about any of this with me or my sisters or my mother or anybody. So it's been a great treat to be able to communicate with Dad, rocket scientist and mystic, and hear not only the Pleiadians, Arcturians, Andromedans, who just borrowed me to go out to an asteroid a couple of weeks ago to work on their new space, and just go back to the time I went on craft with Dad at age 5 and then age 6 for the hybridization program, where they took eggs for me because of my DNA, and then at age 10, I remember them putting stats in my head on one big craft, and they took me to Jupiter and Mercury and Mars after that for a few weeks. So this has been going on for a long time. I mean, my first astrology chart done was when I was 19, when I went to Boulder, and they said, as did people since then, you're a starseed and you're a baby mama. Well, I didn't know what the heck that was, and I continued with my career, and I got to finally get work at NASA, which was my dream come true, which women back then, didn't often get that opportunity. So they've been watching and telling me for 10 or 15 years to do books, and I did this wonderful book last year with Barbara Lamb, asked her to do that with me, called E.T. Friends in Space, because now I'm sort of coming out of the quiet closet of not talking about this after being a single parent and working for a long time. I know I'm here to help heal humanity in my little part. I'm here to help with my voice, with Dave, with others that are listening here, to play our part to really shift and be here to tell stories about what our experiences were. And yes, I was born with a lot of ADHD, a lot of dyslexia, post-traumatic stress disorder from some of that. And now I realize, after talking to Dave and my father and dozens of people over the last many years, that yes, I'm not crazy, that yes, this happens to people. Yes, I had a lot of babies, partly because of my DNA. And that's why I've also been taken off planet to do subsurface interiors of these cold caves where I work with ETs and different species and humans to really create better, happier, healthier environments inside these dark, cold caves, like I've done here on Earth. This was a dark, cold cave, even though it's got a big window. It was gross when I bought it. It was dark walls, even in a very superficial sense. That's what I'm here to do on my little part that I play. But I wanted to just show you, Dave and I are going to talk a little bit about some of my hybrid children, and I'll show you some pictures of them and talk a little bit in the 20 minutes that we have about some of the places I've been that have been just starting to wake up. I was told literally by about 8 or 10 different people since I was 18 or 19 at that first time. When I was in India 40 years ago with my rug business, in New York and Hong Kong, all the places I've worked and lived, and they'd come up and they'd say, you're a hybrid mother, don't you remember? You don't remember yet. And I said, well, no, I just have these memories of being on craft when I was little and time traveling and going underneath, sort of seeing Atlantis and a lot of water and people and civilizations and underneath the Egyptian tombs, and I had a lifetime there as an architect. So anyway, I have had glimpses of this my whole life, and really after being a single parent for a long time, and thank God for COVID, we all had to stop and go deep inside, and I found Dave, and my friend's son passed, and I thought, oh my God, we've got to help find somebody to ease her pain, and in the process, we were hearing about what life was like in the ether, more and more with weekly calls, really with Dave, or several weekly calls for over a couple of years. And then I saw what his gifts were, and it's helped hone mine as well. So I actually have 128 hybrid kids or more that are living. You can see this picture. It's a little drawing I did 30 years ago or 20 years ago before I even knew about the hybrid kids. I have 33 living on Earth, or 3 in China, 3 in South America, 4 in the Pleiades. They're in Europe and Spain and France. Some are autistic. All of them tend to like space. They're all pretty smart. They're 4 feet tall and 10 feet tall and all different shapes and forms, because I am, according to Dave's system of LOC, which he calls a level of consciousness, I'm 16% human now, and the rest ET in all different forms and shapes. And of course, each lifetime we're in, and we live in different places. We're here for different reasons, on planet, off planet, and so we're here now. So here are a few pictures that we've unearthed of a few of my hybrid children. Some the blue one lives on a blue asteroid over near my face more. It's 8 foot tall, pale blue skin. Then the one in the middle is an average human build, 4 feet tall with bright white skin. The one in London lives is 5'3" with ruddy, sort of reddish brown skin, high IQ, plating with some Arcturian. So digging through my past, my two Earth children are 30%, both of them are about 30% hybrid. We look back at my father during his lifetime, at his birth, at his death, to see how his LOC of what his life was, ET-wise. And it goes back to the grandfather. They all have hybrid children, and they were part initiators of the hybridization program a long time ago. And I think that's why I was escorted by my dad onto the craft at age 5 to sort of take some of the fears out of it, because it was a little spooky back then. But, and these are some more of my hybrid children from South America. And there's one woman from Ecuador who's a cardiac nurse, fascination with techie stuff. There's Geraldo, who's 24, that lives in Brazil, communicates with crystals. He suspects he's an ET. He is adopted. He lives on his own. Then there's King. I have 3 from China. I've spent a lot of time in China working. I'm part of my rug business there for a long time, traveled there a lot over the years, so no surprise that I have a connection there. So these were a lot of the children that I had during, if I'm 70 now, in my 20s. And they're all in different ages and different places. So, Dave, do you want to just comment on that for a minute? It's pretty wild to know that I have all these children. I've spoken actually to a few of them in the Pleiades that are in their late teens, and we've had communication. We've done some design stuff together, which has been really fun, with Shirley Bolstock, a good friend of Dave's who is past, that I worked on a book with, who was really incredible to help me talk to them. But anyway, do you want to talk about the hybridization or any of the kids, just how that works a little bit for people that don't understand? And there's some more too on, the blue people. I've got 25 hybrids that live on a 4-mile long craft. That's a 260-year-old spacecraft. And we're not going to go through all 28 of them, of course, here. We're just giving you a smattering of my children, which I hope someday I can meet and talk to some of them. But yeah, if you could explain it, Dave. I know you're
Sure. Well, there's some people who've postulated, and I think there's probably some truth to it, that in our DNA we have 23 strands, and some people who work on more of the ET focus, they say we have 23 because we're the combination of 23 different races. I don't know if that's specifically true, but I think there's certainly an element of truth in it. And one of the big pictures things that I see is we're moving towards a major energy shift, vibrational shift, however you want to call that. 2012 was certainly turning the corner on big things happening. There's a reason the planet feels like everything is hurry, hurry, rush, rush. Everybody pay attention. Everybody get annoyed. So you start coming out of your burrows and seeing what's going on, like prairie dogs, instead of hiding out underground. And I think part of this is the opportunity to help modify our DNA through energetic hybridization to be able to handle the shift that's coming. One of the things that was fascinating to me in one of the Edgar Cayce books that he wrote with his son was he felt that some people had severe nervous system damage because they were being moved upwards too quickly in vibration. He said it's kind of like blowing fuses on the wiring on your house, too much energy. So a lot of what I see happening with Mary, other people doing this type of thing, people looking at all this, is we are being modified and prepared so we can handle these higher vibrations. Otherwise, they might be very harmful. This even goes back to the idea that you run into in the spiritual plane, that there are multiple levels to the spiritual plane, and you kind of bubble up to your natural level. And if you try to go to a higher level when you're not prepared, the energy is just too intense. One of the analogies I heard was it's like trying to walk up to somebody arc welding with no eye shield and trying to look at what they're welding on. It's just too intense. Um, so I can sort of see that happening for us. Many people talk about moving into the 5D reality. Um, the 5D reality may look very much like what we have here. It may be a totally different way of comprehending and communicating. And it would be helpful for people to be evolving towards that so that it's not overwhelming. Um, we really don't want anybody left behind. Certainly, we realize that there are people who have different personalities and some have pretty negative personalities, but we're still looking for ways to move people forward. I would say the other thing that we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years, um, we've seen a lot of people leave the planet. A lot of people have passed, some very unexpectedly young, and um, you could say, well, that's because of COVID, that's because of this, that's because of that. And it's like, well, but there's a lot of other people who just they're in their 60s, they've had a good career, they're healthy, they've been checked out by the docs, and one day they find them in their house and they've dropped dead. And I think it's some part energetically, they've made a decision at the spiritual level that they would rather go back to a spiritual plane and look at a reincarnation coming into a new body than taking that body and moving forward with it. And but there's a whole lot of people who are here. They're here for the long duration, and I think there's going to be a lot of changes energetically for most people to help them be able to tolerate these major shifts. And they may come through physical changes to the DNA. There are people out there talking about upping the number of DNA strands, and they're saying, you might go to 46 or 72, or I'm sorry, 48, 72. All these different strand counts that you read in the literature online, where people feel like they're being accelerated, and I think the spiritual plane is helping with this. I think the ETs who work with our spiritual plane are helping with this, and they're looking for ways for us all to move forward. Uh, I think we're at such a critical juncture where our technology has outrun our ethics and our morality and our spirituality for most people. I mean, the very fact that we still have nuclear weapons on the planet and we haven't evolved past that, um, I think says a lot. It just, we don't need them. We should never have them in reserve to use them as a last ditch, effort to deter somebody else from attacking us. So there's a lot of technology. Most of us thought the internet would be great when it first came out, and now we see so much stuff on that's dispersed that um, is people deliberately trying to manipulate and shade the truth and manipulate other people or to use it for criminal activities. And so we still have some evolution to do. As we continue developing these technologies. Okay, we can clone animals. Should we clone humans? I don't think so. I'm not very keen on that. I think there's a whole lot of details there that I'm just very uncomfortable with. We need the ethics for that and the morals. Are there different countries on the planet who are already cloning humans? I bet there are. I have no doubt of it.
Chinese.
So all these things are pointing to a need that we have to evolve. We have to be set up for evolution. And so I think these opportunities of doing actual biological hybrids that we see from ETs, they may have been clumsy in their first efforts on how they harvested eggs back in the 70s and 80s, where uh, they terrified people.
Well, the 50s,
They left them
yeah, it was pretty
left them with
terrifying.
nightmares.
Yeah.
And thankfully, regression hypnosis helped a lot of these people kind of come to grips with what had happened to them. Um, they at least knew, even if the images were a little bit disturbing. But we've gotten past that now with most of these ETs, and they're much more sophisticated and much more sensitive to how we think and how we would react to these settings. And they're also advancing on their techniques on how they work with humans to move things forward. So just a whole lot of this just seems to really be just in a big swirl, but if people keep in mind the goal is always to help us raise our vibration and to do better, and ultimately to however you see the world, to know your connection with the creator better, which is probably the ultimate goal. um, as long as you stay aware of that as being the prize, then um, yeah, you can tolerate that there's going to be some missteps here and there.
Well, that's why we're here today talking, and that's what connecting with the stars is, like stars with you that have had these experiences. And like me, we know we're in a big revolution right now and a big reset and reboot post COVID. And we know the ETs are here. I've known since birth that I was protected, and they just keep supporting me and nurturing me and giving me more information and more support all the time. All the time. They come and visit me here, check out my apartment, which is really sweet, a lot more the last few weeks.
Hmm.
And just to even just, have them asking me to come up and take these dark, under a cave like dwellings in this inside of these, subsurface of these planets, to even have somebody come up. They call me the artist or the scientist or the designer. To even they want to include humans in this decision along with the ETs, so it's a more cross-cultural interior, like I've done
Hmm.
hospitals and hotels and the space station in the 1990s with Dr. Von Clearwater at NASA at Moffett Field. I mean, we were thinking then, how do you make it humane for all? And that's what we're coming to, is the leveling out, hopefully, the frequency to lift the people up who are so trodden and fear-based instead of more love-based, like we are more and more all the time.
Hmm.
And the speed of this, that we are seeing the whole sort of collapse of our financial systems or religion. I mean, everything is shifting right now, like 52 car pickup. And it's fascinating to see where we will end up. And as technology wanes and the veil thins with ET and exposure, we see ETs everywhere now and all over in our movies, on a TV every day. That we may not get the disclosure from the government necessarily, but we're getting it from us individuals who are here speaking on these YouTubes and on all these shows right now. That it's incredible, sharing our stories to create less fear, more hope, more positive relationships that we have with the ETs. I'm delighted that I can work and help on off-planet interiors as I still do them here. They've asked that I help them come to Earth, and I'm obviously helping them go off Earth, off planet, and that's a delight to me. Pretty crazy. For still, I'm just coming, as I said, out of the closet right now, talking to Dave, and even being on this show that I'm doing right now. For all of us who have had these wild and wonderful and scary stories to share, to help each other evolve together as one fine, beautiful Mother Earth support system as we are now. We want love, we want oneness, we want unity, we want people to rise up and protect Mother Earth and Father Sky and prepare for the future and prepare our kids for the future, so they're not freaked out like I was a lot of my childhood, because I wasn't able to have my parents explain to me what the heck was going on. And that's why, Barbara Lamb in my book and a couple other books that I'm working on right now I hopefully are going to help condition and prepare kids and adults, because the parents buy the books and read with the children, to help them understand and be an aid to them that, like on humans, a small percentage of humans are terrible, a small percentage of ETs are terrible. If we can all band together and share information and stories of positivity and how we can help each other, the ETs are really wanting to help us. We have to clean up our own mess that we created here on Earth. They can't help us, but they're watching and they're hoping, they dislodge, nuclear sites. They're showing us themselves more and more every day all over the world. It's really wonderful. And they come and visit and remind us to remember, which I am right now with Dave's help and my own help, that we can, and remember that we can only learn so much at a particular time. And I did wake up at 70, and I've been waking up for my whole life trying to remember what I've done and how I can help more here now. So anyway, I loved our talk. I love being here with you, Dave, because you show so many different insights in my path that I would have never been able to figure out all by myself. And
I'm glad I can help. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. So I know your email, your website is davethemystic.com. If people want to reach you for a
That's the
session,
best way.
is that
Yeah.
the best way? And again, I think we're all here to help create happier, healthier lives however we can. We all play our part. And Dave's a great example of that. I've met so many people the last few years since I've been sort of trickling out into the world of this. I'm so grateful that I have found you and all these incredible people from CAN, Conscious Awakening Network, and all the people that are banding together right now to create a whole new system. It feels like the 60s to me. It's really a love fest that's starting to come in. I know there's a lot
Hmm.
of turmoil, but we are going back to those times where we want to make love, not war. We don't want wars. I mean, I was on the cover of Time magazine protesting in Boston in 1969 with my boyfriend from Harvard at the time, going, "Oh my God, I can't believe what are we doing down here?" So
Hmm.
we know that we're all growing together, and we're sharing our stories together to heal and share our gifts so we can help all different people of all ages to expand and manifest and set
Hmm.
our intentions high to help heal the planet, which we're doing, and make the world a better place. Have a little more loving kindness with each other each day, that we're all learning daily to feel more and have more empathy for everybody. So, anyway, a pleasure to be with you again, Dave. Do you have any other parting thoughts here today before we head off?
Well, just something for people to think about when I muscle test on how many of what you think are ordinary people out there walking around on the streets and the stores as you attend different things. I usually get around 3 to 4% of those people are non-traditional humans. They're hybrids or visitors. They might even be spiritual beings that have incarnated temporarily just to walk around with us. So keep that in mind when you're looking at other people or feeling the vibration, is that some of those are not traditional run-of-the-mill humans, and they are generally here to help us or to at least observe and step in if they're really needed. But they're all curious about what we're going through now, so they wouldn't miss this. This is the latest Hollywood thriller for them, and they're all gathering on the red carpet to watch how it's going to play out. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. Yeah,
Yeah, we sign off with good intentions for everybody here to keep saying,
absolutely.
rise, rise, rise. So thank you all for being here. Thank my blessings and love to you, Dave. Thanks. We'll look
Thank you.
forward to seeing you again soon. Everyone have a wonderful day today and spread the love. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.